Today I'm going to be watching this video. It's called 11 Essential Driving Tips for Tourists Travelling Norway. Now I thought this would be an interesting video to watch because of course recently I learned about the infrastructure of Norway, how good it is, the roads, not just the roads in driving but the ferries, the trains, the aeroplanes. Norway has an amazing infrastructure. But I feel like if you really want to see the true beauty of Norway, driving would be an amazing way to do that. You can stop anywhere you want. You can just admire the beauty as you're driving slowly through the country. So I thought 11 essential driving tips. Let's have a look at this. See what drivers have to think about when driving through Norway. Tell me if you've got any tips yourself. Tell me if you're from Norway. Have you ever driven from south to north? Where's the furthest you've driven? What's the most beautiful place to drive in Norway? Let's watch.
Today we're going to run through 11 tips for tourists who plan on driving their way around Norway. It's a very modern country with excellent infrastructure, so it's remarkably easy to get around. But there are some nuances which are worth understanding before you get started. The first tip is understanding the legal blood alcohol limit for when you're driving. This is important because in Norway it's very, very low. If you're on vacation, chances are you'll be having a few drinks, maybe with dinner, maybe at lunch, but you should know ahead of time that the legal limit is just 0.02. And you could be over that limit after a single drink. If you compare that to most states in the US, which is 0.08, and the UK also 0.08, you can see why this is a critical thing to be aware of. The penalties are very harsh, and if you get caught out, it could completely ruin your vacation.
Yeah, for me, I just never drink anything and drive. I'm completely against that. I would never drink a sip, never mind one glass or one pint or something like that before driving. Especially if you're in another country, you have to really abide by the rules, by the laws. You have to respect that country, so I can't imagine why anybody would want to do that. Is there a problem with drink driving in Norway? It's good to see they're very strict on it. Although the UK and US are a little bit higher, I like that pretty much zero tolerance approach by Norway.
Tip number 2 is to be prepared to pay a lot of money in tolls. As you can see from this invoice that we received at the end of our trip, over 9 days we incurred 26 different toll charges.
Whoa.
This worked out to be roughly $10 per day of driving. Not outrageously high, but it's an extra expense nonetheless.
I mean, when you're driving on beautiful roads like this, it's almost like a tourist attraction in itself. Like paying $10 to drive in a place like this, between those big valleys and on these mountains. I would pay that, man, definitely. Do you think... I didn't know there was tolls in Norway actually, but do you think it's worth it? Are the roads in good condition in Norway? And these roads go through some very remote places. I feel like it's definitely worth paying for it to help the upkeep of these roads. Look at this.
Number 3 is one of the more unexpected things I learned about Norway while driving around the country, and that is how interesting the tunnels can be. Now I know what you're thinking, this is normally incredibly mundane and boring, but by the 3rd or 4th day I started to notice that no two tunnels seemed to be alike. It was almost like a network of fingerprints all around Norway where no two were alike. And strangely, I started to look forward to going into tunnels, but I'm very aware how strange it is to say that out loud.
I mean, look at this tunnel. That's like going through a cave, literally dug through a mountain, but still keeping that rough edge. That's a very, I mean, almost again, like a tourist attraction to drive through something like this. That's what I noticed in those shots. Yeah, the tunnels look very different. Is that something people in Norway appreciate as well?
We have 8 more tips still to go, but if you're enjoying the video so far, take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We release a new video every week which will hopefully inspire your next road trip or travel destination. Number 4 will come as no surprise that in an expensive country like Norway, renting a car will be a huge part of your vacation costs. To make sure you get the best deal, we recommend 2 things. First, make sure any rental you get comes with unlimited kilometers or miles. This can really amp up the cost of your rental if you drive long distances. The second is to use a comparison website like rentalcars.com. This will scan a number of different rental providers and give you a lot of choice so you can select the best value deal for you. We've included a link in the description.
Okay, that waterfall.
Number 5 will give you a window into what kind of wildlife you'll expect driving around Norway.
Got some sheep.
Sheep. Expect at some point you're going to come across sheep just standing on the road, very near the road, or perhaps just hanging out in a car park. Either way, they can be a bit of a hazard if you're not careful. So be patient with the sheep, they're adorable, let them go on their way and they won't bother you.
Yeah man, they're really cute. Have you seen sheep on the road in Norway before? I guess so.
If you want a picture with them, now's the time.
Oh.
Where you going, bro? I wouldn't go in there.
Number 6. Expect to take a lot of ferries. When you're driving around the fjords, there can't be bridges and tunnels to get you everywhere you need to go. A lot of the road connections are done with these large ferries where you can drive straight onto them and they take you back and forth across the water channels. And while this will slow you down, it's actually a fairly seamless process and we didn't come across any major holdups. But you do need to factor this into your driving time when you're planning out your itinerary. But sometimes it can be a welcome break from the car so you can get out, stretch your legs, enjoy the view and the breeze in your hair.
It's a very nice inside area with big windows so you can enjoy the view without all the cold wind like I'm copping out here. Plus a cafe, bathrooms, all that.
That's what, I mean, he said he was looking forward to the tunnels. I would look forward to those tunnels too, but I would also be looking forward to the ferry journeys. As he said, just another way to experience Norway rather than driving as well. You're just sitting on this nice slow ferry in on a fjord or in amongst these like huge cliff faces and stuff. It's stunning.
While we're on the topic of potential delays, tip number 7 is expect a lot of roadworks on very narrow roads. Sometimes this means there'll be a whole lane of traffic blocked while they let traffic through on another side. This was the biggest cause of delays that we encountered on our road trip, and they were harder to predict on your navigation apps as well. So you might need to give yourself a reasonable buffer if you're in a hurry or have an inflexible deadline like a flight you have to make at an airport. Tip number 8. Speed limits are not always appropriate for the conditions. We were lucky that the vehicle that we rented had a speed limit display on the dashboard. This made it easy to keep track of what the limit was wherever we went. Sometimes the speed limit was much higher than what it would have been safe to drive at given the conditions. There's a lot of bends in the road or variable conditions of the road itself, especially in bad weather, that makes it worthwhile to just slow down a little bit and take your time. Staying safe when you're doing long hours on the road should be your top priority.
Yeah,
And that brings us to tip number 9.
Have to be
and that is
responsible.
that Norwegians are incredibly patient and courteous drivers. Can you say the same thing about the drivers in your hometown? I certainly can't. Road rage, beeping your horn, all of those things are just not cool. To give one example, I was driving down what I thought was a deserted road, and just before one of the famous Norwegian tunnels, there was a small turn-off for something that we thought we wanted to stop and take a look at. This was a last-minute snap decision, and I slowed right down to see whether there was room for me to pull the car off the road. What I didn't realise is that there was a car right behind me. He sat there patiently and didn't make a sound, and I felt quite bad when I realised that he'd been sitting there for at least 10 seconds waiting for me to move. I waved at him to offer some form of apology, and once I moved out of the way, he just drove past without ever making a sound.
I mean, some of these visuals are just unbelievable. It just doesn't look real. Size of that waterfall, that one on top of the mountains. But yeah, what he said, is that relatable to you? Do you think Norwegian drivers are patient and courteous and friendly? I live in Asia. Drivers here are definitely not. They're very rude. They drive crazily. It's absolutely mental. So I feel like driving in Norway would just be so enjoyable. Do you ever get road rage in Norway?
For tip number 10, we're going to move on to something a bit more practical, and that is paid parking. When inside the major cities and towns, there will be a lot of paid parking. A lot of it is very obvious inside major parking stations, But on the street, it can be more difficult to spot whether you have to pay for a parking spot or not. So memorize these two words. Mot av gift. Forgive my Norwegian pronunciation there, but it essentially means you can park there for a fee. Tip number 11 is that some streets will barely even be streets. You're at the mercy of Google Maps or whatever navigation app that you use, and will be especially prone to very narrow streets or potentially ending up in someone's front yard in the narrow streets of the cities and towns. This particular overgrown back alley just looked like a normal street on the navigation app, and I remain grateful we were able to get out of there without hitting anything, anyone, or scratching the rental car.
That's definitely something very unique to Europe, I think, is these very small roads. When you go to places like America, the roads are so wide and things like that, but here, see these really interesting little streets. It's pretty cool for me. I enjoy that sort of driving.
Now, I wanted to give you one final bonus tip to prepare you for driving around Norway, and that is to keep as much flexibility in the timing of your itinerary as possible. There are a lot of really well-known sites that you can mark off on a map and tick off one by one on your road trip.
Whoa.
But some of the best stuff you'll just find on the side of the road unexpectedly, or from driving down a street you just like the look of. You will get the best out of your Norway experience by being open-minded to what you're going to discover and having the flexibility of time to be able to follow wherever your nose takes you. Because not everything is in a guidebook or a YouTube video. And nothing beats discovering a hidden gem that was unexpected that ends up becoming your favourite part of the trip.
Wow. Such a stunning video, man. So many beautiful places in Norway. It's unbelievable. But yeah, a great way to see Norway by driving through there. Definitely agree with that last tip where you don't want to be too inflexible in your schedule. You want to just keep stopping everywhere, admiring the natural beauty, taking photographs, whatever. But yeah, tell me if you've driven in Norway. What's it like? Where's the most beautiful place to drive in Norway? Thanks.